Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to the regular council meeting for Monday, August the 12th. It's 7 p.m. I'd like to remind everybody that this meeting will be broadcast for public access and viewing pleasure. So with that, could I get an adoption of the agenda? So moved by Deputy Mayor Plant, seconded by Councillor Bannister. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. As always, I'll remind everyone that there's conflict of interest forms in the middle of the table. If you do have a conflict of any item on the agenda this evening, please fill in the form, declare that conflict, and pass it into the clerk stating the reason and step out during those periods. With that, we'll move on to item number 4, adoption of the minutes. Item number 1, regular council meeting from July the 8th, 2024.
So moved.
So moved by Councillor Thorne, seconded by Councillor Detour. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 2, special council meeting from August the 7th, 2024. So moved. Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Bannister. Questions to that motion? No questions to the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 5, consent agenda. You have all received consent agenda items in your package. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda item? Moved by Councillor Ovelinas, seconded by Councillor Thorne. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 6, public and administrative presentation.
And this evening,
This evening, moving on to item number 7, reports and recommendations from committee and private meeting.
same this evening, nothing.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 8, reports from administration. Item number 1, proposed residential development incentive program. And we have Jamie Burke from Stantec with us this evening. I'd like to ask you to come forward to the podium, Jamie, and I think you sent the presentation ahead of time. Yeah.
I did, but I forgot the,
Okay, well,
Oh, the clicker?
so
you may
you're
just have to point to Diane.
gonna have to give me the little,
Give
Little nod.
No.
No, it's fine.
it's too hard.
To connect it,
Okay.
that's fine. Over to you, Jamie.
Yeah, good evening, your worship and members of council. It's a pleasure to be back here. Actually, it's been a long time since I've been council chambers for a meeting, so feels good. Doesn't feel like that long ago either. So I'm going to start tonight by telling you a little bit about the work that we've done. Then if you want to put the next slide there, it'd be great. I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are, do an introduction of myself. We're going to talk briefly about some housing programs across Canada that we've looked at. We're going to move on to some recent population growth trends, which I know all of you are probably pretty dialed in about, given the commission the work in the first place. And then we're going to get right into the recommendations, and we'll finish with enough time for a short Q&A if that's okay. So I guess we at Stantec take safety very seriously. So we always try to start with the safety moment. So I guess one of the questions that we typically ask, we can go from Christmas lights, getting extension cords off the ground to emergency exits, but I'd be curious to know if there's any AED systems in the building or the closest one.
Couldn't be any closer, I don't think.
Closer, just right around the door.
It's right there.
So I guess the message is, they're here, they're in our facilities, and it's not to be scared to use them. And I know the emergency services department is a big proponent of those. And I think the incident in the NFL last year where, the whole world really saw firsthand exposure to the need and necessity of them. And then the most important thing is to use them. Right? That's what they're there for. So quickly about who we are. My name's Jamie Burke. I'm a planner and Atlantic lead for urban planning with Stantec. We are as well. So we're a large company. We have now a little over 31,000 employees across the world, 400 offices around the globe. We were founded in 1954. We're headquartered in Edmonton, Alberta, largely a service and engineering firm. But we have a kind of an international presence. We like to promote and we're very proud of our local presence. We have a a large office here in Moncton. We have a bigger office in Fredericton, and then an almost equally sized office in the city of St. John. So we're Atlantic wide. We've got offices in Sydney to Charlottetown to. So we've got a full suite of infrastructure professionals, from architecture to urban planning to engineering at our fingertips. And keep going. It just kind of just shows the map where we, some of the locations we are. So, I think everybody's, Austin, I guess we don't really need to talk too much about, I guess, our role. So we've been retained, Stantec's been retained to provide this, this report for you, which is basically a review of financial incentive programs across Canada. And then to provide a recommended approach for the town of Salisbury. So one of the things that we suggested we would do in our work plan was we would conduct what we call a jurisdictional scan of not necessarily similar sized municipalities, because a lot of things that happen in larger cities are scalable. So we really looked at municipalities who have had recent success with financial incentive programs. And when we did our kind of cross Canada tour within our own firm, these were the main locations that have come up. So I'll talk a bit about some of them. We won't get into all of them. You have the report, so you can flip through those at your leisure. Whitehorse was probably our I guess most interesting example that we uncovered. So a little over 28,000 people in the city. They have a housing development incentive policy where they encourage development of similar and denser housing options for targeted locations. They have a suite development incentive, which is more targeted towards kind of accessory dwelling units. And we know that, with an aging population, we want to try to promote that type of supply. They have a neighborhood density development incentive, which is really focused on growing specific locations within the city. And they have other types of programs, like a tax grant incentive, which basically gives a developer or corporation a return on their, this is based on the amount of money that they pay. Woodstock, a little over 46,000, also has a fairly intensive residential incentive program. A lot of municipalities, particularly in Ontario, also popular in British Columbia and in Alberta, they have development charge costs. So a developer who's building the building has to pay for certain things, even though there may be offsite infrastructure improvements. And we're starting to see municipalities in New Brunswick get there, but we're, obviously for the town of Salisbury, we're still a long ways from there. But it still does show that municipalities are giving incentives in a variety of forms to the private sector, mainly for a number of reasons. One is it could be to provide supply, which is what, it's my understanding that the town here is looking to do, but it could be just a transition of an area that may have been contaminated. There's brownfields that they want to redevelop, and so that the municipality will provide those types of incentives in order to allow those areas to develop a little quicker. You can see some municipalities like Woodstock, they're in the loan business, so they'll actually, personally small loans. They'll provide some type of, kind of guarantee to a developer to be able to finance some of the proposal and make it a little easier to go to the bank with that type of statement that would be able to show a lender that you have some financial support from elsewhere. And then they have, we don't really need to talk anything about the incentive goals. They just really depends on, which municipality. A lot of them are in the downtown core, which, as you know, kind of urban. We lost a lot of people from downtown centers, which is evident even in the city of Moncton. But a lot of communities have what they call community improvement areas or community improvement funds, and that's what then starts. That's where the fund, I guess, is housed, and that's what ends up paying for the program through the municipal operational budget. St. Thomas's was another example. You can see like very explosive growth between 2016 and 2021, going from 38,000 to 42. So a little over 10% increase in population. And we know that the residential supply is not there to provide that level of population, to accommodate that level of population increase. So they have a residential program that provides grants for the construction of new residential units and the renovation of existing units. So this was one area within our kind of jurisdictional scan that we thought, if somebody was gonna do a building conversion program and take, potentially an old could be a dilapidated commercial building or existing commercial building and transition that to a residential building, maybe there's an opportunity there to incentivize that. To provide people a little bit of extra help to make them think a little differently about the building footprint that they have and what they have to work with.
Well,
So you-
that existing infrastructure would be less expensive to renovate than to build new.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally, and, from a greenhouse gas emission perspective, but, also from a, materials, infrastructure need to supply sewer and water.
Concrete's more expensive than it used to be.
We've got. So they also provide a planning and building grant program. So if the development community is undertaking a project, that meets certain requirements, they'll forgive basically the fee requirements. Sano, Alberta, I think this is the smallest community we looked at, so 1,216 people. But again, this really shows that it doesn't necessarily have to be big cities that are going to in the financial incentive business. It all depends kind of what's reasonable and what's manageable within their existing budgets and what are the priorities of their existing council. So they have a variety of incentive goals. They've got a residential housing development incentive program. They have a reallocation, I think that says revitalization development incentive, so, trying to transition specific areas of the municipality. And they've got, interestingly, a backyard suite incentive program. So that again is that specific, money allocated within their program to incentivize those garden suites, coach houses, an accessory dwelling unit, which could be for, could be for a loved one or a family member. Supply additional revenues that you can afford your mortgage. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. That's on the housing. Goderich, Ontario, again, another really good example of some of the grants here. They have a design and study grant, which you'll see in the program we're suggesting here is a potential option. So allowing the municipality to offset some of those initial capital expenses that a developer would have to do, and sometimes that's a barrier. And sometimes it's just enough of a carrot to be able to get somebody to do something that you really want to happen in your municipality. So you can see they've got again a bunch of different incentives. Again, this is probably the closest example for the town of Salisbury, about 7,800 people.
Now, all these incentives, they're all set at a maximum per unit.
Yeah.
But do they have a maximum in terms of how many they're gonna fund per year? Like, is it first come, first served basis that they're trying to set whatever development goals or?
Yeah, it's a good question. Most are on a first come, first served basis. Yeah, they'll say you've got a pot of money of X and whoever's in the queue first, that's how the money will get allocated. And then the municipality will either reallocate money depending on what their financial status is at the time. Or they'll have to wait till the subsequent year where the money was set, the municipality will set aside more money.
Because to me, it seems like it's gonna sound odd, but somewhat of a Ponzi scheme that you can have money coming in and out and continue to fund more development over
Yeah.
time.
And the idea is that, you're incentivizing development. So in theory, that would provide additional cash to the developer, right? So you're not reinvesting quickly. And then we did, we always want to know the local context. So we often, when developers come in, we're often compared to our neighbors. Heard that many times in my career. So Sussex doesn't necessarily have an incentive program. They do offer incentives, but it's mainly on the capital cost as part of their subdivision requirements. So you can see that's another example that we put in a potential program for Salisbury that there is potentially a role there to play for the municipality if you choose.
More infrastructure.
More infrastructure related, yeah. So, paying a portion of, sewer, asphalt, those types of things that are we know are really, really expensive. And we know, as part of this process, we had a developer focus group meeting upstairs. We got a great turnout. It was a really, really good factual, meeting. We got a lot of interesting feedback from the local development industry, and we know that it's expensive. I mean, if anybody's trying to build anything or get a contractor, hire a plumber, like we know the price of things has gone crazy. And,
But due to that cost, then it has to be recouped,
totally. So the
So
more expensive
everything
it is to build, the higher the price of the unit.
whether rent or.
Exactly,
sell.
whether it's rent or ownership, you're right. Grand Bay Westfield literally just implemented a financial incentive program. I believe it's tied to their housing accelerator fund, so they have an additional pot of money available. So I don't want anybody to leave here thinking that, wow, you know, Grand Bay Westfield must be flush with cash to be able to offer this type of program. They did apply through the Housing Accelerator Fund and were successful. So this program is a piece of that, and it's fairly intensive. So you can check out the details of that within your report. And, you know, just because one community in New Brunswick is doing something doesn't mean there's not a one size fits all solution to this for every community. And that's why we've kind of picked little bits and pieces out of the variety of jurisdictions that we looked at to come up with something that we think makes sense for the local community here.
The question becomes whether something would have happened regardless of the incentive or not.
Totally.
And if you're just incentivized, it would happen regardless.
Yeah.
Then that's moot. The
Yeah.
goal would be to actually incentivize something was not gonna happen.
Yeah.
One way or the other.
Yeah, and you really don't know. You know, that's the risk. I guess the nice thing about a program like this is that it's easy to monitor, right? You'll know the money that comes in because you see your tax revenue. You're gonna see the money that goes out as part of the grant program. And the grant program has to be recorded, you know, annually in your annual report. So it's easy to kind of keep track and monitor. You know, you wouldn't want to do it just after 1 year. You kind of want to give it a couple of years to be able to see if there's a trend and whether it's making sense. And if it's not, you can always discontinue. You guys are the pilots, right? So you have that opportunity. And then there's a couple of other programs. Moncton's doing one, you know, Sackville's doing one, Tantramar, sorry. Riverview has a similar type of program. Moncton particularly aimed at the downtown core, to try and facilitate development. Riverview in certain areas to facilitate commercial development because they have a very high residential tax base and they need more commercial activity. In Sackville, it's more of a combination of the two. It's commercial in certain areas, but also multiple unit residential development, again, to diversify the housing stock and create more commercial tax base.
This is gonna sound odd, and I might be thinking out loud, but if the goal from the village or the town's perspective is to increase property taxes, as that is our main source of revenue, ideally, we'd be trying to incentivize mansion being built so that the higher property taxes would be created. So it's either a small amount of more expensive housing or a larger amount of lower income housing, whichever the case is.
Yeah.
What is the more profitable way of growing the housing base in the town?
I think it becomes a policy question of what the
Yeah.
values are in the community, right? And I think in this case, we know there's a housing, we're gonna talk about the housing crisis, right? So part of this, you know, these incentivized programs is to diversify the housing stock. Right, because we know people have less disposable income, right? They're paying more for groceries and paying more for housing, so they can't afford the mortgages, you know, that and housing prices have increased. So, you know, my wife and I are fortunate that we bought our house when we did. So you've got the you know, the new generation, we're kind of getting in, you've kind of let us right into the kind of the local trends here that we've got the local population who they don't have the money, they can't afford the mortgage on a new home. So it's not attainable. And then you've got, you know, my dad's 82. He lives in a, you know, bungalow in Cape Breton. It's a huge property. Complains every day about mowing the grass. He doesn't have another option.
But that to me is the prime example of the demographics that we are seeing in the Maritimes in general.
Yep.
That there is a large group of baby boomers who will be retiring or have retired.
Yeah.
And do not need the size, whether it's size house or property or whatever the case is, that would like to downsize at some point in time.
Yep.
And to get that merry-go-round, people moving around to free up that housing and have a place for them to go as a retirement community.
Yeah.
And then which is the more beneficial avenue to go down to actually try to move those people around in the housing market.
I think it's having I mean, you kind of look at like an investment portfolio, right? Like we wouldn't invest all of stock or all of it.
Diversification.
So and the housing market is the same thing. We need single family homes because we know there's a demographic out there that can't afford them and wants them. But we need other types of products on the market for, you know, whether it's a retiree, a new teacher, a newcomer family who comes with multiple generations. So, you know, a 1-unit apartment or 2-unit apartment doesn't fit the bill for them. So I think that's really the answer is it's a diversified.
Seems to me this always goes back and it continues to come back around to many in terms of young families starting out.
I knew that's where you were going.
Older couples for couples who would like to downsize, it's a properly designed, infrastructured mini home. That's fundamentally my opinion.
It's an awesome.
I don't know why you don't build one, like you,
I honestly, I've looked into it.
you got. Give up one of your fields.
Oh, there's land here.
It's
Build the house, build them any.
People don't want to live in the country. Not my end of it.
So just, I guess to put things quickly in perspective, I mean, we often use, some of this material when we're presenting to, groups who may not be accustomed to the terms in the housing market in Canada, but we know that the baby boomers are still the largest single generational group in Canada. They're aging, right? We know that, and they're gonna look for different products. Millennials are now the dominant childbearing group, right? And Gen Z is kind of following them, and they're having fewer children. Like, that's the reality. Like, I don't know anybody in my 47-year-old age demographic that has 5 kids. My dad's family had 5 kids. I know somebody who has 4 kids, and they've got their hands full. But like those days of having those huge families, that like we don't have them. We don't have them.
It's a good start.
So, and then we've got recent immigration trends, which are showing huge numbers of people coming not just to Canada but to New Brunswick. And I'll show a CBC headline here in a second that shows that. And the federal government has prioritized the labor shortage. Right, it's only been recently where we've seen a pullback on post-secondary education requirements for students and for Mexican visas. Right, where those are really the first 2 signs that the federal government is saying, okay, well, we're going to start to kind of temper the immigration levels, where before it was put on the pedal nonstop, right? It was all about kind of continuing to bring in people to be able to fuel the labor shortage, keep the economy growing. So those are really the trends that would have kind of contributed to the housing issue.
And full throttle is the right approach, but they did nothing for housing to accommodate anyone coming.
Housing,
Fundamentally.
Doctors, like
Yeah.
schools. I talked to anybody at the school board, like, they can't build the schools fast enough anymore. What they thought was going to be able to accommodate students is now no longer, appropriate. So it's a combination of things, but the housing market is not kept up.
But which problem do you want? Not enough people or too many?
Yeah,
It's not.
these are not easy answers or easy solutions.
They both have problems, but
Yeah.
less people is a bigger problem.
You can flip the next slide. So, population growth by the large Canadian cities, and I guess this is certainly applicable here in Salisbury, because we know Moncton is just probably 20 minutes to the downtown, 20 minutes to the downtown core. So you can see that people have always talked about Halifax. Well, Moncton has outpaced Halifax in terms of growth between 2011 and 2021. And we're now, we are the fastest growing region in Canada. We have, our company is we finally kind of got their attention on the like how fast things are growing and the need for bodies and people to be able to keep up with the demands for work. You go to the next slide. And then similarly, immigration in Canada, you can see that Nova Scotia is still leading the way, but New Brunswick is not that far behind, and we've been leap years ahead of Edward Island and Newfoundland. So we've got immigrants coming. We all probably know somebody through the pandemic who's moved, or moved home or moved here because they wanted to get out of the city. So I think we all have kind of anecdotal evidence that kind of supports these types of trends. So we can see kind of record growth, in terms of adding 25,000 people in just a year.
What year was that?
2022.
2022 or
22?
Again, there were 750,000 people or 775,000 people at that point. It's not even that many people, relatively speaking.
No.
It's just the housing has not kept up
Yeah.
with that. many.
And then you can see that we're, now larger and younger after the storm surge. So we always just talk about an aging population, which we still do because of the boomers, but the demographics are certainly.
So I
changing.
remember correctly, for a period of time, there were more deaths than births in New Brunswick.
Well, could be.
It may have been 5 years ago, but not that long ago.
So in terms of future population estimates, this wasn't really part of the scope of work, but we have a model that we typically deploy when we're doing housing needs assessments for communities. So We ran in this case just because it was kind of, we thought it was applicable and would kind of help inform the work. So you can see what we're kind of predicting between, future population estimates between now and 2041. So potential increase of a little over 3,000 residents. An estimated housing needs of, a little over 1,200 additional dwelling units. That's a lot. It doesn't seem like a big number, but it is a lot when you look at an annual kind of building permit.
This for Salisbury?
But over 20 years, it's only.
It's 20-year, it's a 20-year plan, so.
2041.
That's only 60 houses a year for 20 years.
That's a lot for the town of Salisbury.
For this town. that's
Yeah,
a lot.
it's a lot, but that's not a lot in a lot of other places.
No, you're absolutely right. It's not, but I think that's, we always try to bring ourselves back to the,
Yeah,
the community, and 60 units in a year here would be a heck of a year.
That would be a boom.
It would be a boom. Yeah, it would be, and that's the boom we need in order to sustain
Yes.
population growth.
This
As we know,
is a good chart. This is awesome.
So we were still seeing that the preferred housing style is still single detached, and that's not expected to decrease. That's what people, people want, but that's, again, reminds us of the need that we need to have additional types of housing typologies for people to be able to choose to live here. If it's only single family homes, you're not gonna be able to capitalize on that growth that people are gonna be looking for and need. So just a summary slide of the kind of the drivers behind kind of, we think is kind of this work that we're doing for you, but also some of the work that we're doing across Canada. So smaller household size, boomers, a sluggish transition between housing generations, which is we're seeing. There's also this kind of drive to qualify idea where, in the city, at one point used to be really, really cheap. It's not anymore. Inner city homes are now very, very expensive. So you literally need to drive out of the city until you can find housing that's more in your price range. There's unexpected trends that nobody predicted, the school board, the planners, you name it. Higher immigration and interprovincial migration has been a key factor. And then we've got financial factors that include interest rates and then investments by non-owners that have also changed the landscape. So into the recommendations. So we've provided 4 recommendations. The first 3 are kind of, I think, in support of the program. So basic observations that we uncovered, I guess, as we went through the work, including talking to your local development community. So I guess the first one would be in terms of the policy that we were asked to produce. And we think it should be a pilot project, right? It would be irresponsible to go in and say, this is the way it's got to be. Like that's not good enough reasoning in our opinion. That it should be a pilot project, and that's how it should be pitched to residents to show you are going to keep an eye on the success of this, and you're going to review it, refine it, and tweak it as needed. But it also, honestly, helps with getting financing in other places, right? The intent of this is that this wouldn't be all town of Salisbury money, right? The idea would be that, yes, the municipality would put skin in the game and say, we'll commit, we'll just use round numbers, we'll say $100,000. And you can then, much like anything else, you can then go to whether it's the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Regional Development Corporation, or any of these kind of other government entities and try and secure additional funds. Say, we put in 100,000, a lot of times it's matching or certainly at least up to a portion. So that's part of the strategy behind the first recommendation. The second one is that we think there should be a corresponding municipal plan amendment. Because one of the things that we heard from the developers is that they have to go through a lot of times a comprehensive water assessment. And that comprehensive water assessment may say that the water volume in the aquifer that they're tapping is able to sustain X number of houses. But at the same time, the zoning bylaw has these ginormous lot sizes for good reason, because everybody's on a well. But if the comprehensive water assessment can show and demonstrate and suggest that a smaller lot size could be doable, then that makes the project more economical for the development community. So if there was flexible policy in your municipal plan to support that, then if somebody came in with, Jamie Burke Consulting come in with a project, we could say, well, the evidence, the engineering evidence is here. We've got approval from the Department of Environment. We would suggest that we go down to a lot size of X. And maybe then you can create a new zone, but you can at least revisit the lot standards in the bylaw, and it wouldn't go against anything in your municipal plan. So it would be kind of supporting policy language that would introduce flexibility in the case that that would happen. I suspect it will happen. The other is to just simply to pursue secondary planning. There's been several, I think 2 Austin subdivisions now, fairly, complex subdivisions on, for example, Fredericton Road. It would be wise to invest in a secondary planning exercise, and literally what that is you kind of go from your 350,000 feet down to 50,000 feet. You say, okay, we're going to master plan this whole area. So it takes the guesswork out of developer A and developer B. Right, you in partnership with the Regional Service Commission, maybe it's a consultant or they do it internally. You kind of map that whole area out and say, this is how this area is going to develop, because we need an area for, for example, a school, or we know we need a certain size park, or, we know we need a road connection for emergency services personnel. You kind of check all those kind of municipal priorities, and that goes into your secondary planning exercise. And then when the development community comes in, the roadmap is already there. So you're not trying to convince somebody to put a road somewhere else because it's more economical. You say, no, the road has to go here. And oh, by the way, there needs to be at least one sidewalk on X street. So it's almost like a mini planning exercise, which makes the rules more clear for the development community. And then the 4th is the specific incentive program that we're going to talk a little bit about right now. So the goal of the program was to focus new residential development. There's a bit of a caveat to this, in areas serviced by the municipal wastewater system. So that, we understand there isn't municipal services throughout the community, because a lot of it is rural, particularly following the local government reform process. But you do have municipal infrastructure, so you need to maximize that investment, because that's where you're going to get that's what you're going to get your best return. So as the councilor said, it's less infrastructure, right? So the infrastructure is already there. The more density, residential density, we call it, a fancy planning term, on that sewer line, the more revenue you're going to generate as a municipality in terms of your property tax, but also on your utility side. So you're getting, you're getting a better bang for your buck. The caveat to that is that, I talked about that in the third bullet maybe. The second is to assist with pre-application expenses. We heard from the local development community that the studies are expensive. They need to hire somebody like us to come in and, kind of ground truth, and sometimes it's a wetland delineation, or sometimes it's an abbreviated or comprehensive assessment. So part of the program is a pre-application grant, where you give them a portion of that money back as a bit of a carrot. And then, of course, an overall goal is to increase the range of housing options, because that's what we've been talking about, kind of here at the onset. And one of them that we originally thought, well, if you were going to do an accessory dwelling unit, we'd only incentivize development with basically that could be serviced. We thought, well, really, what's the harm in incentivizing accessory dwelling units in all areas of the municipality? Right? If somebody wants to have an additional unit, it's not a big load on the well. It's not a big load on the sewer. So it's the septic system, you can get an approval for that. So we thought that should be something that's incentivized throughout the whole area to increase housing options. And then lastly is to explore cost sharing opportunities with the private sector. So we'll now go into each one of these in a little bit more detail. So the pre-application grant, it's exactly that. It's got to be pre-application. And these are literally for professional services. So a site plan, it could be architectural expertise. Maybe they need to hire an architect or an engineer to do one of these studies. That would be covered. And we think it makes sense to focus on the abbreviated and comprehensive water supplies specifically, because that's what we heard from the local development community. So we're suggesting that the grant will be accessible up to 2 times per project. So if you had to have, somebody do a comprehensive water assessment, you'd be entitled for, up to $5,000, depending on how much the project will cost. It's going to be more than $5,000. And if they wanted to hire some architectural expertise, they could do that as well. So it's up to 2 times per project. The residential incentive grant is a bit of the catch-all. So this one is intended to really where we're looking at increasing and encouraging the supply of new housing, and as well as alternative housing products and styles. So that could be different lot sizes, that could be different size units, and we'll see if it goes on the next slide. So this will be accessible to a developer or builder based on a per unit basis. So what we call a per door. So depending on the number of doors that they build, it's only accessible once per project. And, the proposed use that's being permitted has to be allowed, right? Because we don't want, it would not be good if we put council in a position where you're contemplating a grant for something that's not allowed and you have to go through a rezoning process. Right? You can't support something, then be in a position where you need to vote on something later. So we've also highlighted that if an application to the planning review and adjustment committee is required, that's okay, but that process has to come to closure before the grant program can be administered. And that way you have the grant program, that other kind of legislative process, that's all done. You don't need to worry about getting into trouble. So there'd be four types of I guess, eligibilities for this type of program. So the first would be building conversions, where an existing building is being converted or expanded to include one or more attached or detached residential dwelling units. The second would be the creation of a new accessory dwelling units. That's those granny suites, secondary suites, etc. Could be attached to a home. It could be a conversion within a home, which we see a lot of, particularly in Ontario. The next one would be a new residential building of 3 or more units. And the last one would be a new residential development that includes 3 or more bedrooms per dwelling unit. And you may say, well, what's up with that one? Well, that one is targeted specifically at newcomers. Because we know sometimes they're coming not just with one family, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3. And we know that 1 and 2 bedroom apartments is not suffice. You know, as part of our work with the town of Riverview, we were talking to the Greater Moncton Multicultural Association, like the size of the families that are coming through the immigration program are not, you know, kind of 2 people. It's multi-generational and they need multiple bedrooms to be able to sustain. So we think that's probably it's at least a start. So this would be $10,000 per door, up to a maximum of $40,000 per project. So we tap out if the most the developer would get would be $40,000.
If I added a granny suite to my house, and I decided I didn't want to have my granny there, I could just, lack of a better, would there not be abuse of that particular incentive that you just expand to your house and have the title solver paid for?
Potentially.
Well, of course, there's people out there that do that.
That's what comes to mind immediately.
Yeah, I mean, it will be, it'll be self-policing, like, it'll be complaint based,
Yeah.
like the existing enforcement procedure is, and, word will get around if they know somebody got a grant for something now. Granny's not there, especially much easier to police in smaller communities than in the bigger cities.
Would there be a minimum square foot attached to number 4? Just because, people would plan to build main floor on the- and say, okay, well, I've got 2 rooms down in the basement, so I'm gonna call that 3 bedrooms. I guess that's my question. I guess there would have to be some sort of ruling to say, yeah, in order for you to make sure that it was a 3 or more bedroom, that you associated a square foot to that, because to his point, people could just build a 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom upstairs,
Yep.
or a 1 bedroom and say, I've got 2 bedroom down.
Yeah, it'll be all determined as part of the building process. They
Right.
have to submit their plans, and that's what the building inspector is going to look
Yeah.
at. But I mean, it's a fair point. We talked about, as we kind of went through this kind of internally at our own, like, kind of with our own staff. We thought about, the bigger the unit, the more we incentivize it, but that doesn't necessarily kind of do the trick either. So I think this is something you could start with. I'd be a little more concerned if there was a university here or something where people may start to abuse the size of the units and, start trying to cram in students close to campus or something like that. But I think you could start with something like this and just keep an eye on it. Your building inspector will be the first one to raise a red flag to say, this isn't gonna work. Or, this is working fine. We don't need to change it. Maybe we should include a minimum, dwelling size per unit in order to incentivize it.
Mhm.
I think when we start to go down this road, we need to consider, other designs for that kind of home. It could be that we may need to insist on a separate entrance, for instance, rather than just a main entrance.
Again, adding an extra door is not a big cost if you're getting a $40,000 grant.
No, I'm just saying, it's more,
I don't expect.
I was gonna say, As somebody who's just about to buy 3 doors, let me tell you, they do cost a fair chunk of change.
And he's not buying mine.
Yeah, but anyway, all I
I
was saying,
think there'd be some.
He would-
having
He would-
lived for many, many years in Brampton, I can tell you that you will need to have some due diligence when it comes to that, especially if there is a significant influx of new people coming in, because the abuse is definitely there. And the challenge that you have as a municipality, and I know I'll get called up for this, maybe if someone outside of here hears it, is the more and more that you have, the less and less inclination the municipality has to do anything about it, because they form a fairly large voting block.
I'm guessing that this program is intended to promote the development, less about policing what happens afterwards, and the building permit, like the home inspectors, there's very deep rules around what you can build and can't build, and it has to be signed off on
Yes.
from a house development.
Right.
perspective. So
And what happens after
it's
that?
just, we can't,
Yeah.
police, like, the positive is that it's available. So
Right.
whenever somebody leaves, there's a house now that has multiple bedrooms in it. I don't know.
No, my point out on the 2 or 3 bedrooms is simply this. Anybody can put rooms in their basement and call them a bedroom as long as it has an egress window in it.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you're not gonna have a craft room and a sewing room in those rooms. That's my point.
Yeah.
Sure.
If
just
we're
don't know about the difference there.
incentivizing,
Yeah, but it can be a bedroom for the day it was done. And if
absolutely,
you change the-
absolutely. So are we, I guess that we come back to that. Do we care about that? Or do we just care about, we want more housing?
Development.
We care about development.
Development and options.
And that's what it comes back to. So really, do we even have to say that? Do we even have to say, well, it has to have 3 bedrooms? I mean,
'Cause
I guess that's my point.
Yeah,
If
it's a-
we're not gonna police it, then and all we want is a new building or a new house. Well,
My argument with the 3 or more bedrooms, the goal in of itself, especially for the town of Salisbury, is there are a lot of older farmhouses that had these larger families, had more bedrooms. To get some of the people that were not necessarily needing all of that space anymore. Somewhere else.
Mhm.
And then to get that incentive to get people moving around.
Yeah.
To actually tailor what housing stock would you have to the people who need it.
And forgive me, one thing I didn't say at the onset is that like, this is a draft, right? So like, you're not approving everything tonight.
You mentioned pilot as well, though, keeping in mind that the pilot can
Yeah.
be modified and changed based on what we're seeing, what successes are, what challenges we face.
Yeah.
So that is the idea. We have nothing now. It's to.
Yeah, I think
start
that'd
this
be,
development.
that would be an important component for me. If we're doing a pilot, what is our measure of success at the end?
Yeah, sure.
Well, to me, it should be the first domino, and try to get that first domino to fall, to get
Yeah.
things rolling.
Go to the next slide then. The third one is a building and development permit fees grant. So this one's easy, just if somebody's building a unit and it's designated as affordable, so they've signed an actual agreement with the Canadian Emergent Housing Corporation, they get their building permit fees back. So we heard from the development community that the development fees isn't a big, it's not a big barrier for them. But if somebody was interested in, potentially a nonprofit group, for example, if that was their business and they wanted to do it, then it is a bit of an incentive to say that, if you are putting at least one affordable housing unit, they'd have to furnish the agreement to prove they are. And then you'd be able to give them the building permit fees back. And then lastly, is the kind of residential subdivision cost sharing grant. So this would would be intended to assist with capital costs associated with new residential subdivisions. So if somebody wants to claim a regular standard subdivision, it would not be eligible. This would be specific to different lot sizes and housing options. So they would need to come in with a site plan, conceptual plan, that would show that, including a phasing plan.
Does that really matter to have different lot sizes going on in one specific subdivision versus having that variety throughout the entire town?
Well, I guess the worry is that if we leave it to the private sector, we won't necessarily get the variety that's healthy. Right, so this is again, this is a bit of an incentive to say, well, I'll do 10 single-family home lots. But I'm gonna do I'll do a couple of townhouses. I might do a 2-unit or a duplex. You know, all kind of within the overall list. So for this one, we specifically said they should have to have a comprehensive, water study. In this case, it will be multiple lots and you're offering. Definitely offering incentive to do that. So they need an overall concept plan that would show the proposed lot sizes, housing styles and phasing. And then the available cost sharing items would be sewer lines. Asphalt, which would literally be the wearing surface, right? Not the base gravel, et cetera. It would literally just be the asphalt, which we know is a bit of a hindrance for the development community. Signage and sidewalks if they're necessary. They might not be necessary in every particular instance. So this is a big one. This one could be up to 25% of the total construction cost.
It's
Eligible
so
site.
exciting.
So again, this one would be, you know, this again is a philosophical policy decision of council about, you know, how much you want to be in the development business. I mean, as a former municipal employee, I'm always intrigued by, so I spent 20 years in the public sector before coming to Stantec. And I just find it funny that, you know, when I first started my career, you know, the scope that municipalities are responsible for was, you know, say this big. Recreation has increased, tourism has increased, marketing and communications has gone like tenfold in social media. You know, so the expected service delivery areas has ballooned. Emergency services, you know, you name it. Policing, so everything's grown. Right, and now we're talking, now we've introduced housing into that. Right, where housing was always a, you know, federal provincial responsibility after the war, the federal government built houses. So that was their business. And, you know, they've now removed themselves from that to a large degree. Yes, they're offering funding, but they don't build things anymore. So it's putting like an added pressure on municipalities to act because the residents are looking at you guys to help. Right, so we think this is the, you know, potentially a way to respond to that demand in a reasonable, measurable, logical, defensible way to be able to incentivize development a little bit. You're not paying for the whole shop, but to give them a little bit to incentivize development to potentially improve things. So the application process is quite easy in this case. We've put all the onus on Austin. So obviously council will have to approve a program. Right? The program will be, you publicize it, right? You probably do a press release, do all kinds of things around it, and then the program would be in play. So somebody would have to come in and discuss the project eligibility with the town. Seems like almost like a pre-consultation natural step. They would then make the submission. They would you know, provide a kind of an application package that somebody would fill out with all the necessary details, so you have it for your own, you know, because municipalities get audited, so you do have to have a proper trail of that documentation. So they provide a completed application form with supporting documents. The CAO or designate would review the application for the criteria in alignment with the development goals of the municipality within the program. The estimated grant approval and timeline would get issued to the developer in a letter. So the CAO would provide that information to the developer, and then there'd be an execution of a formal legal agreement, which you could, or, you know, you could register it against the property if you wanted. You know, a form of policing, you know, but there's other ways to do that too. You could just keep it internally if you wanted to. So in terms of roles and responsibilities, you know, the CAO would be responsible for managing the daily administrative functions, overseeing the incentive program and reviewing and approving applications. And I should add to that kind of, you know, providing that, you know, whether it's a monthly, bi-monthly, annual kind of update to you. And then council's role would really be to assist in the review of the program and monitor the program effectiveness and ultimately determine if you want to keep it on an annual basis, depending on what your budget looks like.
So having said all that, what is a good budget to start with a pilot? And then therefore the full-blown program?
It depends on your budget.
I understand, but aspirational, what would you recommend? And then also then therefore full-blown.
I would say if you could do $75,000 to $100,000, it would be a good start.
I think Grand Bay Westfield is 130 or 100. Yeah, it's over 100, but I think under 150, and that's with half money. So our intent would be to try to double whatever we do. So let's say we do 75, we try to get up to 150 through
Is
RDC.
that true? But it also, you also have the second intake of half program going through currently.
Yeah, and we're talking about that
Since we
later.
did not get
Yes,
the first round.
yes. And this program was in our first action plan, and if we apply the second time, would be in our second.
So if we use 150,000 as a round number, what is the best bang for our buck for 150,000?
What do you mean, what's the best bang for your buck?
Where is the best place to start from for a pilot project?
I mean, to approve the program would be the first step.
Yes.
And then first come, first serve.
Support all of these programs, whoever comes first.
And it's reevaluated annually to see if you're funding it properly, if you need to do something different.
Which would be good, focus on a particular,
Do any of them, Jamie, I never thought of this as a draft, but it makes a good kind of, it leads us into, I guess, on if any of them have like, almost like a mid-year
Review?
yeah, to say like, cause let's say come June, we have 10 projects and they're all eligible and they're all at their max, well, we could have $300,000 worth of potential projects that year. So is there, I guess at that point, come June, is there any of them that have any, I can't remember off the top of my head, have that kind of midpoint check-in where they say,
I'd have to check with the team.
Okay.
I mean, they could do a quick review of each program and see if there's a midterm checkup or anything.
or some sort of, or if it's annually or whatever, but I'm just thinking midpoint in the year, if there's a financial benefit or a return benefit to the municipality to defer a project by 1 year if it's our own and allocate that extra 150 towards it as just an example, or chase an extra 150 to say our program's really working, we need 150 more this year. I don't know if there's a way to do that, or if, I don't know.
Or do you adjust partway through and where instead of 25%, you're doing 15%?
Right. Yeah.
Well, and then that's the thing, like, to me, just that 150,000, if you were to use that, you're gonna incentivize as a 10% incentive, that would incentivize $1.5 million of development. And then that property taxes the following year on that development would then also help fund and carry on going forward.
Yeah,
Increase.
you're right. I mean, the main intent of the program is to generate
Yes.
additional housing units. But the flip side of that is that if you have additional housing units, you can generate more revenue, which are gonna help cover the cost. of the
Exactly, the
program.
point is, like,
Yeah.
it's to
Yeah.
self,
We probably
Fun.
want that in the,
I wouldn't use the word.
Call it that.
I think it requires a lot more thought, because at the end of the day, if you're gonna publish this,
Yeah.
you know, and you're saying this is what's available, to sort of move the goalposts within 6 months for someone else who was looking at doing a development, it might not look so good on where we're going. So we're gonna have to be real careful about how we go out, at least in that first year where, you know, we have to be careful that we stay the course. Otherwise, we'll lose credibility with developers if we just keep changing things because, unless it's in their favor, of course.
but if you're turning applicants away because we're out of money, and if we all of a sudden found more money, would we reach back out to those applicants and say, hey, there's been additional funds allocated, are you still interested?
They wouldn't stop calling even if you ran into
But
money.
even that their application would carry over to the following year. Like, there's
They have
ways to
annual-
keep everybody interested.
That's kind of my question is, do they carry over? Do they, if not, we could have 10 applications on January 1st based on the ones that didn't get in the year before, right? And then by January 2nd, it could be exhausted. I just don't know how, or if others have that.
Well, yeah,
I don't-
you can't carry forward, but you know,
Exactly,
You can't
yeah.
just carry it forward.
Yeah.
Reallocate the file and,
But it could be like, we could have applications held until they submit on January 1st and then they're reviewed and.
I guess it's a good problem to have if we
Yes.
reach
Yeah.
that from a
That would be a
budgetary
great
perspective, we would have to look at increasing budgeting, to your point on starting with the dollar amount that the
You're saying if you
Council
get, like-
talked about, so great problem to have if we encounter that.
Yeah, so you're saying if we had like 20 applicants and we only have funds for 10 this year? Like, what happens with those other 10 that you're not funding? Are they still, are you
Well,
holding those applications until, or are they reapplying?
Well, I would say if they, like, let's say this year we had the program in place and we have 20 applications, we funded 10. So by, let's say by today, we funded 10. Well, between August and December, there's 10 others. If I were them, I would just have an application ready for January 1st of 2025 to say, here you go. So then by January 2nd, we have those 10 that are all exhausted for 2025.
But we'll be in conversation.
I would think we were waiting.
Yeah, we'll be in conversations with them and others to understand whether or not the number is sufficient or we're gonna need to increase it. And if we need to increase it because there's that many in the hopper, that's a great thing.
But the other side of the coin, though, I think if you had those 20, you funded 10, you had 10 that were not funded. That half of them decide to build regardless. You'd wash your hands of it and say, good
Well,
luck.
then, but you gotta measure that as well with KPIs and factor.
Are we,
Because they obviously we're gonna do regardless.
would we have to go first? I mean, I'm assuming first and foremost, we're gonna have to get a good idea where all the development activities are in terms of the land that's. I mean, are we close to even having an understanding of that?
In what sense? What do you mean? Like
Well,
for
you know,
all of these different pieces?
Yeah, I'm looking at the map saying, okay, well,
Well, that's why one of the recommendations
where is it? Where,
it-
you know, where's the land?
is the secondary plan piece for some specific areas, but I think the overall premise is that you want to, like Jamie said, maximize the
Maximize the
serviceable
serviceable
boundary
boundary,
where there's
secondary
existing services. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's.
Councilor Cole,
that's gonna be
next
like-
question up just for everybody's.
Thank you. I was just gonna make a comment about the waiting list and stuff, because I know like part of this is we need housing. The other part is we need to make it easier for developers. In my opinion, I wouldn't wanna throw out an application. We might wanna give them a day or two to respond and say,
I can't go so, sorry.
we might wanna put something in place that if they're rejected, and let's say the new application year is starting, we give them a day or two to reply with their intent to continue. Right? And then if they don't
Yeah.
reply, we move on and reject, like, kind of put it off. I just want to.
I think maybe we look and see if others, because there might be an easy solution that
Yeah.
doesn't complicate.
I guess for me, it's the point is, we want housing. For that to happen, we need to make this easy
Yeah.
on developers as well as
Red
affordable.
tape cut as much as possible.
Yeah.
And Jamie will get some answers from other areas.
Yeah, we'll do.
We'll bring it back.
You wouldn't want the same person that got
Exactly.
first,
exactly.
like, so it would have to be structured that, you know, from 1 to 20, if you can only do the first 10, then 11 to 20 are your next in line.
That's right.
And you would need to help them win in order for them, because you wouldn't want two coming back and beating the application, you know, on January of the following year.
Right, yeah.
Then we'd be
Something
accused of
Exactly,
favoritism
yeah.
and.
You're gonna be
all that
accused of
stuff.
something.
I'm sure other communities are facing the similar methodologies in building, Councilor Lucas.
So the development that we're gonna talk about later,
Mm.
how many times could they, I know that that's different, it's happening now and not in with this
Mhm.
policy. But for something like that,
Mm.
they're building one building and they're coming back and they have to do another water test for the second building. How many times can they come to the pot for that one development?
So that was probably my biggest takeaway of our first draft. We added a definition, I shouldn't say we, Stantec added a definition to say that a project is a project, even if it's phased. So that would be a project.
Yeah, that was a really good.
Yeah, that's- yeah.
And we only thought of that because I wondered the exact same thing, running numbers. So, yeah, it would be a project as a project, even if it's phased.
There's a lot of new projects.
What's that?
There's a lot of new projects coming up.
I think this is fantastic.
Yeah, I love it. Fantastic.
I like the report, Jamie.
We'll straighten it up. We always do.
But I come back to number 4. I don't think there should be a restriction. A door is a door, whether it's 1,000 square feet or 2,000 square feet. To me, if you're incentivizing and we want growth, we want build, we want houses, why are we stipulating it has to be 3 bedrooms? Because we're not gonna police it. Are we, Brad?
He's on it.
Do you know what I mean? Like.
I,
the
well,
whole
I
this is
I
growth.
do, I kind of agree, but I do understand what Jamie's saying as far as the newcomers coming into the communities needing bigger. It does incentivize to build bigger dwellings, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, but I'd argue you don't have to build the bigger one's already here. You just need to get people who don't need them anymore
Well,
somewhere.
You need to convert.
maybe.
And I think the concern from our perspective, the number wasn't up there, but the projection was that it's over 92 or whatever that number was, that's gonna be single unit dwellings over that 20-year period. And we know that right now, it's about that number right now, it's about 92%. But we know that there's a large demographic that don't have the options to get into those single unit dwellings.
Mhm.
That we have or that will be built. So if we incentivize those will be the first ones that we see projects that we see projects incentivized, which means that rentals aren't being added, multi-units aren't being added, accessory dwellings aren't being added. That would be my personal kind of cautionary tale from the municipal perspective. And I think we had discussed at one point not even having single unit dwellings in the incentive program, and then we looked at doing a bedroom number to say, okay, we will incentivize it because we know it's a big component of the housing stock, but not every single unit dwelling. There needs to be
Mhm.
certain parameters. So that was the rationale behind it.
But that's where,
Add, like maybe, I don't, you might have the numbers, but I'm sure there's data somewhere that says, this is our growth projection. This is kind of the demographic of that. Here's kind of the funds that we decide, we want to put towards this, the percentage of type of incentive program based on what we need for the growth demographic. Because that could be we might have a data person, so essentially our budget line for this grant process could be 10% this type, 20%, whatever. And then if we get to a point where we've exhausted and there's nobody coming forward for the other, we can move funds and reallocate if needed. But I'm thinking with all the presentations we've seen in the last 6 months, we know numbers on a whole bunch of different housing needs and people growth and all this stuff. We merge all that together. We'll be able to get an idea of, and that would be probably the more intelligent way to look at it.
It's there to a certain extent, it doesn't recommend saying we should allocate X amount, but there are some numbers in there that reflect the municipal boundaries and the municipal kind of makeup. It doesn't say 10% for single unit dwellings and 50% for new subdivisions.
So it'd be a good start, right? I mean, it'd be more intelligent than us trying to decide it on our own.
but it comes back to
Yeah.
demand, and the demographics are key.
Yeah.
Because that dictates what the demand's going to be, and both in terms of the demographics of the current population,
It's still a pot, we're never.
but it's also who is coming in. What do they want? So incentivize both people are coming in from away and from the demographics that are currently here, and what do they need?
Yeah.
Because your father's a prime example. He's not going to be there.
No, we have to drag him out of that.
Exactly, at some point. And he-
This is not public record, Jamie.
but fundamentally, he does not want to necessarily go to an old folks home yet.
There are.
That intermediate step.
Jamie, do you have any idea of, from an affordability standpoint, what people are looking for? Because, if we were here and I'm not saying we're doing this, but if we were saying, well, we want single family dwellings, well, you're already putting yourself in a position where there's a whole bunch of people that wouldn't qualify because of the potential cost
That's
of a
right.
single family dwelling. So there needs to be some notion, and I don't know if it comes into the demographics or what else is, what is and maybe we need a portion of homes that are between this and that price, recognizing that market values change all the time. But even if a place to stand and a certain number of homes that are, valued at this, because if we had, $400,000 homes all over the place, well, that wouldn't necessarily solve for the problem that we're trying to solve.
There's only a percentage of the demographic can handle that.
Yeah.
And the people to talk to fundamentally are the realtors. They know exactly what the demand is currently. They know what the housing, the supply side of what is available currently and what people are missing. And I've heard from realtors already in the past, they can sell all day anything under $350,000, they can sell all day long. No problem. 350 to 750,000 is a hard sell. Anything over 750,000, no problem, because those people already have enough money to buy whatever.
Sure.
But that 350 to 750 is a difficult part, and that's where you see a lot of the available housing today is in that range. But sub 350, not a problem.
I don't, just thinking about your question there, Counselor, we'd know kind of what the average income is of people. So, I guess if you said, okay, well, we want people to not spend more than 30% of their income on housing, that would be kind of
Benchmark.
a benchmark. But the reality is that there's other people who, even though they can afford it, they want the choice. And I keep using my family here. My brother's single, he's in Halifax. He does not want a house, right? He could not maintain a house. He doesn't want one. he can afford. I think, he's a lawyer at a big law firm, he does not want one. Right, so he's in the city, he can have a condo. But if you were to move to a place like, we'll say Salisbury, you know, would he have a suitable option that would kind of be in his market?
How old's your brother? I have a single son. Oh, never mind.
But in itself, someone like him, would be one of them, because we don't have, we have.
She's almost 40.
Yeah. they're gonna-
What's our condos anywhere around here? Greater Moncton area doesn't have any.
I
Or
guess
more.
I would like to see us kind of incentivize what we need or what we think we may need, or at least allocate it that way and we can move it around.
Maybe we can take that one away too
I
and
think it's a
look.
good one to take
Yeah.
away. The other thing too, I guess I'd remind you that you know, that every year you're gonna get to reevaluate, so you'll kind of know what the demand was year after year. So kind of year one, a bit of a leap of faith, but year two and year three, you'll start to figure it out.
Yeah, maybe
And I-
you don't need to overthink it so much.
I think
For year
Yeah,
one.
I think you're right.
I think this is exactly what we want. That's a great starting point, which is what we need to
Yeah.
have to build on. And that's why I like the idea that you used the word pilot. So we can then come back and modify and change and make, again, if all the ideas come through that the council's hoping for, then,
Yeah.
and that, I
Wow.
think that 12, the 1241 that you had might be double that.
That's right.
That's a good problem to have. So, really, I love your reports and we can do it more, looking forward to when
We're just
the
passionate.
staff comes back with recommendations.
I think so, yeah, because I think the one piece too, because Councilor Collery mentioned the data person, I think that's us, and I think the piece is that we don't want it to be an administrative burden, right? We want it to be quick and simple.
Yeah.
So I think there's a way we can take that back and figure what some options are. And then Councilor Thorne asked if we wanted a motion. So just to be clear again, we're not ratifying this
Right.
tonight, but we do have a recommendation on the floor to basically approve it in principle and direct us to work with Stantec to finalize it. So I want to be super clear, this is not, we would still like the motion, because if council says, no, we don't want to do this anymore, then we would need to know that. I don't think that's the case, but again, hypothetically, so yes, to your question, yes, still.
Okay, so I'll move, the council approve the residential development incentive program and principal and direct staff to begin formalizing the incentive program in the form of a bylaw for introduction in an upcoming regular council meeting.
So moved by Councilor Thorne, seconded by Councilor Dykstra. We have questions to the motion. Acceptance to the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Very minded, motion carried.
Could I have one more
Thank you very
question?
much.
Well,
Do you have, when you look at some of those cities and towns that you were talking about, is there, thinking about administration and the cost of monitoring this type of thing, where do you go? Is there a point where it becomes part of the CAO's job and then all of a sudden we need somebody full-time looking after something like this? Like how long does it take to get from there to it's now needs to be somebody's full-time job?
Economic development officers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you need to worry about that at this point. I mean, you know, and not saying you won't necessarily have an economic development officer at some point, but I think because you have an agreement with the regional, your contract services through the Regional Service Commission, they've got multiple inspectors, right? So it takes some of the burden off of Austin to have to administer the program. But you're right, and every time, like no different than recreation, every time you offer a new program and you offer a new service, somebody need a body to staff it to do it.
Yeah, because, you know, like, Austin's doing a great job spending lots of time on programs to get us money.
I thought you were gonna say spending
So
money.
did I mean, and I guess I look at it from a holistic perspective, because everybody comes in with their little silo and say,
Okay.
this is what the CAO should do, and this is what the CAO should do, and this is what the CAO should do. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of this is what he should do. And at some point in time, because this is gonna add to the whole cost of the program as well. You know, I just wondered if in your experience, you've seen it, that there is sort of that little, that point where now we need to look at something like an economic development officer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of, that's part of Austin's responsibilities to be accountable to you. Like, if he finds that he's administrating, like, the program is taking more time than he envisioned, then he's gonna come to you and say, we got a problem.
Right.
You know, if we want to continue to do this on a regular basis and continue to expand the program, we're gonna have to hire someone.
Yeah, I had no doubt that Austin would come and do that, because, you know, he's pretty shy when it comes to those sort of things, but I just wondered whether you had any experience with it, that's all.
And I think
Not in terms of like a threshold for economic development. We got small municipalities that have economic development officers. You've got cities that have, economic development departments. I don't think it's not like kind of like, human resources where there's kind of a threshold of employees where, you need to hire an HR person. I think, economic development is there's a little bit more finesse and,
It's an art.
it's a bit of an art.
I think that's why I flagged that piece that you had, right? Is because right now that program, that's no different than the conversations that developers are having right now with municipality, which is in our current context and structure to the CAO, right? This doesn't change anything other than I'll have a template letter to say, here, we have some cash for you, right? That's the only difference.
And that makes it easier for you, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow, then we should be able to give them more work to do.
Yeah, and the other thing, it's meant to keep the process consistent.
Yes,
Right?
yeah.
It's meant
That's right.
to-
Consistent
to
and
say,
fair.
okay, well, I want something different than developer B, and then you've got, then it puts you, not just Austin, but it puts council in a bad position. So this way it's clear. There's a
Clear,
program,
yeah.
it's on the books, it's on the website, it's
Exactly.
reported annually.
Yeah.
And it
Exactly.
keeps the process consistent amongst the different developers.
Right, and everybody has the same opportunity.
Yeah.
That's the key.
And ideally, the CAO signs the checks.
I don't sign any checks, Diane signs the checks. Not me.
Okay, you've actually gone through the motion, approved the motion, there was an additional question afterwards. So anything else, and then
Well,
we'll.
we're not making very good
I'm good.
progress here tonight.
Okay, so thank you very much.
You hit the air and just.
Yes,
keep
please.
the air,
Yeah.
please, exchange the air in here a little bit.
Thank you very much.
We already did it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jamie.
Rezoning, I'm gonna get a-
Questions?
No,
Can we have a motion?
yeah, I was just joking. I was just joking.
So moved by Counselor Dykstra, seconded by Deputy Mayor Galant. All in favor of the motion, or who's the motion?
Nope.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
We're now in recess.
Oh, okay.
Okay, do I have a motion to return back to regular council session? So moved by Counselor Dykstra. Seconded by Counselor Bannister. Questions to the motion? We're now returned back into regular council meeting. With that, we'll continuing on with item number 8. Reports from administration. We'll move on to item number 2, regional waste collection contract. And with that, we have Counselor Crowe stepping up.
So I'll preface this just with some more context in addition to what's included in the council report form or the CRF. So there are a number of financial implications and details contained in the report. I do want to stress that the motion on the floor is to enter into a regional agreement with the Service Commission. We do not award the contract with the proponent, nor has a contract been awarded. So negotiations are still ongoing. We have the cost implications contained in the CRF, but obviously, as you can appreciate, you can't speak to them publicly at this point. Right now, we're looking at engaging into the agreement. The Service Commission needs our approval in order to enter into said agreement on a regional basis. But what this looks at is further to the discussion with council in March of this year. It looks at a regional waste collection model for the entire Southeast, with the exclusion of the larger municipalities for now because they just went to tender. So this would streamline former LSD and former village waste collection contracts and pass that service requirement over to the Service Commission. All municipalities have been getting escalating costs for waste collection, our former LSDs this year in particular. For example, it was the average amongst all 4 subunits was 25%. And it's been like that for a number of years for any that have tendered in recent years. So the Service Commission, at the request of both the board and the municipal administrators, explored it, and then at different phases. So in our case, in March, got direction to at least signal our intent to start that work. So with that, there is a recommendation on the floor, and then happy to answer any questions, again, with the caveat that we can't speak to any of the specifics of the proponents because they're still in negotiation and it's not our contract to award and therefore not our contract to speak to specifics on.
I'll move the council authorize the clerk mayor to sign and affix the corporate seal on the waste collection service management agreement between the town of Salisbury and the Southeast Regional Service Commission, CERC, to opt into the regional waste collection model subject to a contract award by the CERC at the August board meeting, and hereby authorize the town manager of infrastructure and public works to serve as the municipal contract manager.
Seconded.
So moved by Counselor Dykstra, seconded by Deputy Mayor Galant. Do we have questions for the motion?
Just the increase in those numbers, do we not buy our own garbage truck? Find somebody to drive it around?
This has been discussed in many municipalities, and the WorkSafe premiums alone with retaining staff is often the challenge. And that's part of the reason that the costs have escalated so much. Like the number's in there, but I don't want to say it and give the wrong number, but I want to feel like it's like 60% or something. The cost of a garbage truck has gone up since we would have tendered our former village contract in 2019 or 2020, maybe even 2021.
I think it says 70 and then.
Is that what it is? 70%?
Yeah.
I knew it was a lot. So,
Yeah.
just that alone, there were conversations, a number of years ago, I think with a neighboring municipality, being Petitcodiac, and it was deemed not to be feasible at the time. So it would definitely not be any more feasible with, less dense area, because that's the challenge. You're putting more mileage, you're putting,
More staff, more everything.
I know you don't want to speak to the numbers, but it's not a small contract you're talking about awarding.
no, well, we're not awarding it. It's not our
And
contract.
whoever's negotiating whatever, it's
yeah.
not a small contract, and those are not small increases.
Yeah, no, and if we go out on a municipal by municipal basis, there'll be more than that. That's the
Risk.
Yeah, the risk and the reality. The risk is a reality. I
And
would argue.
prior to amalgamation, this was being seen across the LSDs and significantly seen this increase.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
It's an industry, sorry.
So I'm assuming with the recommendation we have here, feeling is that this will be the most efficient and economical way for us to move forward in the long run.
Because we're gonna have significant buying power now in and of itself. And a lot of the reality is that in our region, people know Eco 360 and the landfill, and they automatically assume they're just the garbage folks, right? Like that's not the garbage folks, but that's where the garbage goes. Didn't say that. I'm sorry for anyone at Eco 360 that just listened to that, but like that, they assume that because the garbage goes there, they're responsible for garbage. There's a human nature there.
It is what people think.
Yeah, people think that
absolutely.
it's like a second nature almost. And so
Yes,
this
but
will assist,
Yeah.
this will assist with that process from
Yeah.
a resident service perspective.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that the intent or hope is that the larger municipalities will opt in too, who have gone away from doing their own garbage collection for those reasons. So down the road, this will be a more sustainable way of doing it. And there's only a certain number of proponents that can bid on this. So they will sharpen their pencils because contracts of this value, they can purchase new trucks, they can hire new staff, they can give multi-permanent, like permanent positions for a number of years, which they can't do if we don't go on a larger scale than a municipal by municipal project. There's just not enough people in our region, let alone our
So will
municipality.
this still maintain a 3-year contract, or will this actually increase the years by going all together?
It's the first one is 3-year and then renewable for 2, I think, and that's because my understanding is to align with some other contracts that will expire to be able to add in.
Because I think the bigger carrot would be to have a longer term contract.
And I think
Get
the
that pencil sharpened and also try to take some of that inflationary pressure over time.
most of them will look at that 5 years, which is what so the former village is 3-year renewable for 2, very similar to what this is. It's kind of the standard. And because of the line, I think that's the reason they went that angle. And what they'll do after 5 years, I would say it's up to the municipality to say, is this working, or is it doing the total opposite of what it was supposed
This
to
was a
do?
poop show.
I think
Yeah.
We didn't want
long-term contracts are the thing right now anyway, with
Oh, no,
interest rates and stuff.
I'm not-
Nobody's signing a 5-year contract on a mortgage for that reason.
I just did. But.
Additional questions?
The only other thing I would say is that it should be, for God's sake, it's not my train of thought. The WorkSafe premiums, that should be run off the flagpole to really try to say what's going on here. Is this,
To do it ourselves?
no, just to run to the MLAs and say that this WorkSafe premiums are becoming onerous in multiple avenues, especially even just for garbage collection, to maybe review why they're as high as they are, so that we're not all paying to the nose for everything.
It's not necessarily the premiums, it's the fact that there's a lot of claims.
It's the claims.
Yeah, it's especially so if you look like in the city, they don't permit the large containers because there are many claims of back injuries, of lifting them out, trying to lift the containers. It's a injury prone.
It's physical labor.
Yeah, but back injuries in particular, which can, from a work safe perspective, can,
So should we just outlaw garbage now? To like, just at a certain point, it just becomes silly. But
Yeah.
anyways,
It's true.
what were you gonna say? Sarah?
Well, you know, those nice uniform boxes that they have,
The bins,
the
yeah,
bins that they're automated, it's fully
Yeah.
automated, so the truck comes along and the truck picks it up and the truck dumps it. So those areas are, you know, their claims are less and less
Yeah.
because it's automation.
and there's
but then the garbage
places,
police can't audit your garbage.
the other can audit it even
Well-
more, because the bins are, yeah, they can
Yeah.
audit even more, the,
Stuff is picking up. It's going into the, it's
That would-
sorted
that-
that
They could
there.
reject your garbage based on improper storage.
the city, looked at that, in 2019 or 2020, I want to say. It was only feasible on a regional basis. At the time, a regional waste collection contract wasn't on the table at all. So that's probably what a lot of places, especially west of New Brunswick,
Yeah.
Quebec and west,
Yeah.
have moved to that model. Will it be part of the conversations? Yeah, maybe, but I don't know when or if or what that would look like. I don't know. Yeah,
All right,
I'll bring it up though at the administrators meeting.
I think, yeah,
Yeah.
everything is becoming automated and to your point, like, I don't know how much more we can all, like, when it comes to work safe premiums, doesn't matter what industry you're in, like, the rates just keep going up and up and up and up.
It's like, it's, a lot of it is what they have to pay for through the state, right?
Yeah.
Physio and Cairo. and
Yeah.
CAT scans and different things, right? So it's not that they're just doing it, they're paying people's wages,
Right.
Yeah.
right? It's a lot, so
Balance points.
that's,
Yeah.
All right,
that's profit.
so no additional questions, with no additional questions, all in favor of the motion?
I,
As reminded, motion carried.
have a day.
We can ask, Councillor Thorne to come back into the room.
We keep going while we're.
Yeah, so, let's move on to item number 3, crosswalk request, K Street and Fredericton Road.
So, council has a bit of a detailed CRF. I want to give just a quick synopsis. So, in May, we received a request, from Councillor Dykstra for a crosswalk at K and Fredericton, near BGC, Boys and Girls Club, as I would say most of us know it. On July 16th, we had a proposed notice of motion, that is included in the package, essentially as an alternative based on some discussions that have happened since. We received email inquiries, 5 in total from parents and guardians or staff members of BGC. The premise is that this is a highly driven road, but also is used to access the Salisbury Lions Pool, which in the summertime is a frequented location for this particular daycare facility. Normally, the notice of motion would just be a notice of motion, but where we were having these conversations, we had essentially a CRF drafted. And so we were able to get some additional details and come forward with a recommendation. So in the province, crosswalks are the responsibility of municipalities. On provincially designated highways, we need DTI approval. This includes Fredericton Road, which is Route 112 from a provincial highway perspective. These approvals from MBDTI need to follow engineering best practices, which in this case are CAT guidelines, so Transportation Association of Canada guidelines. Municipally, we would not recommend installing a crosswalk without following those if it was on a municipal street, but especially where this is a provincial street, they require it. It's not really an option. And it's really a liability and a safety thing for both those using said potential crosswalk and motorists. So the kind of premise that we're recommending right now, knowing that if we look at a one-off, we'll have others, what about here or what about there, is to engage a traffic engineer or a series of traffic engineers, I guess, or qualified individuals to undertake a process to determine where, when, if, what type of crosswalk, where, when, or how they should be installed in order for us to budget accordingly. So sometimes it may seem like it's as simple as putting paint on the road. It's unfortunately not. That wouldn't be safe to do that. And I can't stress that enough, that that's not, we would never recommend doing that because we would be liable. If something in the unfortunate event that anything were to happen, if we don't have engineering best practice to rely on, it can be an even larger situation to look at. So we've requested an estimate from Englobe, who does a lot of our capital works projects and engineering based on a quick turnaround perspective, to look at the provincial highways within the pedestrian, high pedestrian use, basically, areas. And so that estimate, or the proposal, I should say, is included in the package. We intentionally asked them to be as aggressive as possible with the timeline in order to have something for budget deliberations, to be able to plan accordingly. And that process with Englobe, just for lack of, or for sake of clarity, I should say, involves traffic counts, looks at sight lines for roads, looks at speed limits, types of vehicles that may use the road, the type of traffic or frequency of it, so on and so forth, to make sure that we have an objective analysis of a series of locations, obviously taking this into these series of requests into account as part of it. Staff see this as a logical location for a crosswalk, given the points raised, but are insistent on the process. So with that, there's a recommendation on the floor, and I would suggest from our perspective, having the recommendation, and I'm sure there's questions and comments.
I move that council approve engaging Englobe Corporation to undertake a crosswalk priority study at the cost of $14,500, excluding HST, to propose a crosswalk location on provincially designated highway in the downtown area.
Seconded. Councillor Bannister, seconded by Councillor Thorne. Questions to the motion?
Was, just going by memory here, there was more dollar figures estimated for this in terms of the potential.
Like
Was
long
there?
term, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, we just wanted to flag that it's also not necessarily just paint. So I used the example from 2017 of Douglas and Maine. So it was about, forget the number, I want to say 10 grand, which was basically for one of the arms on an existing pole.
Right.
The other existing arm, or the other arm was existing, and replacement of the panels, and then the flashing beacons. So just the two flashing beacons and the extra arm was 10 grand in 2017.
Double at least.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So it went through the same traffic engineer process versus you can get what's just down the road that was also certified by a traffic engineer in short distance away from each other. Just the standard crosswalk with beacons on the signs, which are obviously much more affordable. It's a standard post with the sign that we have to purchase. Ongoing basis, it's limited ongoing costs. It's cost to replace the paint every year, which we do through our line painting program. And on provincial roads, the lines are subsidized, not the crosswalk lines. Is that correct? Is that how they subsidize it, right? Yeah. So it's more of a one-off, which is why if we look at it from a provincial highway perspective, we'll be able to plan accordingly. We can come to council and say, if Englobe recommends doing 5, let's do 2, 2 and 1, 3, and then 2 over multiple years, depending on the type they
And that's part of what
suggest.
this is taking an overall approach, not just a one. From a liability perspective, it's putting the onus on the recommendation from the.
Where's my speaker button?
What?
My speaker button. So this includes, this is gonna be a study. So all of the areas in the downtown area, in the downtown core of Salisbury will be reviewed and assessed to prioritize.
Yes, we went from, they asked for a location, I think we broadened it a little bit. I think we went from Big Stop area
Mhm.
to Frederick Road of Main Street, obviously, that way, kind of grocery store area, but to include trail network additions.
Mhm.
And then former village limits on the other side,
Yeah.
and then to look at the bridge area. So to look at where people would walk within here, where we already have crossing guards, but crosswalks only, all that.
We've had other groups come forward with
Yeah,
this area as well with similar.
When you say the bridge area, you mean River Road?
yes, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah, that bridge.
Thank
Yes,
you.
there could be other options.
Maybe more, hopefully less bridges. Or. well done.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions?
Just one thing to consider with on River Road again, we're putting a trail through there that is gonna be dissected by a construction project in the next couple of years. So we should consider that, we should mention that to them so that they know we may want to have some sort of a connection to be able to continue to use the trail.
That's part of the reason we went to Englobe, who does a lot of our capital projects, because we're consulting on them on a lot of those projects. So there's a provincial project there, but there's also ours for storm sewer on River Road. So they're familiar, at least from our asset management perspective, and can include that. And we've reached out to the province just because they asked us at one point, are you interested in sidewalks? Do you have that in the plan? And so we need to know that. We talk about things like crosswalks. So hopefully we'll get some details, but we haven't yet.
That's awesome.
Additional questions? No additional questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 4, Salisbury Fire and Rescue, SCBA replacements.
So there's a CRF in the package for SCBA or self-contained breathing apparatus replacements. We included a photo there, so we know what we were talking about. But essentially, this proposes committing to a regular replacement cycle over the next number of years, in accordance to the town's asset management plan, and also to address expiration dates, but also to ensure that our equipment is addressing the needs from a safety perspective for members of the fire department. You'll see we did a solicitation by proposal or by invite, more formally, which included demonstrations from all NFPA providers, which then from the evaluation committee of the department had a preferred manufacturer. That preferred manufacturer is also, there's a vendor that is canoe certified. So we went from our usual essentially company that does our service on our existing SCBA equipment. We use that price and information for the demonstration, but also sought pricing from the canoe certified vendor. And also in the end, it ended up being that our current provider was lower from a cost perspective. So that's how we reached the recommendation from a procurement perspective. And essentially it looks, like I said, over a number of years. It's budgeted in 2024, and the intent obviously is to maintain that, and this will be noted obviously in future budget years that there is a commitment there to have them replaced. And with that, recommendation on the floor, and then questions.
I'll move that council authorize administration to replace the Salisbury Fire Rescue self-contained breathing apparatus SCBA equipment over a 5-year period through Levitt Safety, following by-invite proposal process with 3 NFPA certified manufacturers in the amount of approximately $65,000 over 4 years and approximately $32,000 for the final year, subject to reasonable adjustments on an annual basis.
Seconded.
Moved by Councillor Blina, seconded by Councillor Thorne. Questions to the motion?
This is 65,000 spread over.
No, per year.
For you.
Yeah. You can imagine why we're doing, that's one of the reasons we're doing this over a number of years.
255,639.
The wording on that.
Yeah.
Makes
It
sound
does
like 65,000
It does.
65 over 4 years.
each year.
It should say 65 per
Per
year
year. Yeah.
over
True.
4 years.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Diane, can we consider that a friendly amendment?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
It
it's,
clarified the points. It's up to you whether you want to read it.
I think we can just consider it a friendly amendment as long as we note it.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
clarified.
Okay,
Thank you.
Let's assuming I'm friendly to the.
But yeah, who moved it and seconded it, because they have to be okay with it. Hopefully we get
Who's not okay with firefighters having safe equipment?
that. Are you both okay with that being friendly
Back into a
amendment?
corner.
Okay,
Yeah,
suppose.
thank you, good catch.
Obviously, all of us want them to be safe. I don't think there's a. But would this be like a cap, something cap, like where would the budget cap
What?
for this 65 a year?
It's in our operating budget right now. They're capitalized, but it is in our operating budget. So I think the number is in there. I want to say it's 153. I was off. So 153,000 this year. And going into the 2024 budget, the fire department had basically a list.
Nice.
And this was to start for one of them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course.
So, and the other is allocated for other kind of things that are either being purchased or are always purchased every year, that sort of thing. So it's
been,
a
capped
budgeted
for a
piece.
number of years.
Yes, yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
No additional questions. Vote on the motion. All in favor? Very minded. Motion carried. Moving on to item number 5, grant request, Petty Kodiak Watershed Alliance. And Amp Up Dance Studio.
So as council knows, in May, I think, at Committee of the Whole, we had a presentation or a report from staff on a number of grant recommendations, one of which being the Petitcodiac Watershed Alliance. Council wanted additional details, to which was received in a presentation last month in July. And staff, based on that, are recommending or bringing forward that recommendation once again. And then at that same meeting where the Watershed Alliance presented, we did have a presentation from Amp It Up Dance Studios where there was, they alluded to a grant request, which has since we've gotten the details in back and forth with the proponent, which are included in the CRF. From the Watershed Alliance perspective, again, our recommendation is it's bringing it forward again based on the work and the ongoing collaboration that we have with them. So that's the same recommendation. Amp It Up Dance Studios, we are recommending an award on a 1-year basis, and then essentially encouraging them to maintain a multi-year request. We'll consider that in the budget period. The only thing that we will flag from that request is council has discussed it internally and it is FAR eligible. So council needs to be aware of that it is something that the applicants would be eligible for because it's fundraising on an individual basis. But given the popularity of the program and some of the details that were received, we thought it would be appropriate to consider funding through the grant program as well. So with that, there are 2 recommendations to be moved separately. So then we can, I would say, move them and then discuss on a one-on-one basis is probably the easiest. Yeah.
I'll move the council for the multi-year grant request to the Petitcodiac Watershed Alliance in the amount of $2,000 for 2024 and $3,000 annually thereafter for an additional 4 years for ongoing operational activities in the municipality, including but not limited to water quality monitoring in the Petitcodiac River.
Moved by Councillor Colwell, seconded by Councillor Thorne. Do we have questions to the motion? I think for the public's purpose, we did have the Petitcodiac Watershed Alliance in, that was a very compelling presentation.
Yeah, it was good.
No questions to the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. Moving on to the second, the grant.
I'll move the council approve a one-time grant request from Amp It Up Dance Studios for their team fundraising in the amount of $1,000 and direct the organization to apply for a multi-year grant for any ongoing.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Colwell, seconded by Councillor Bannister. Questions to the motion?
The only question I have, all of them,
And then Councillor Colwell.
oh, sorry, is starting to lose track of how many of these we've approved and how much of the money that we have set aside that we have left.
So
It was in, I know it was in the package, but
And we checked with the last meeting as well.
So yeah, and the updated number is, it would be 8,400 that would be left after these requests in 2024.
Does that include both multi-year and
Yeah.
individual? Yeah, we
Yeah.
might need to like next budget season.
Part of the, well, it's always gonna be part of the, yeah, so this year we did it a bit unconventionally because we had a number, as we know, of
Yes.
items to discuss in 2024. So the intent going into 2025 is that council will see all the commitments for grants, all the requests that are pending. So one is Amp It Up. We have some others that we've alluded to. We've received 2 others, I think, so far. So there's 3 others. That could eat up that $8,400 very quickly. So that's when it would be discussed. This year, we didn't discuss it until May because we had to get through budget and then it just essentially kept going down the budget, but it will be
great data.
reviewed annually.
Great data.
My question regarding this, because wasn't confused, I understand why they're asking for the grant, but I'm confused on whether it's the studio or the parents of a specific team.
So I grew up at the rink. So I use it as the example of I would have been, well, not me, my parents would have been responsible for paying for registration for hockey. That goes to the association, which in that context is a not-for-profit. And then the team decides if they want to go to tournaments, which needs to be fundraised by the
Yes, yeah,
team, right? In this case, it's a for-profit studio, but the studio is not profiting on these, on the competitive dance team. So in this case, they're paying their registration fees on an individual basis, which are also eligible through FAR. And then the competitive team is responsible through a separate fundraising committee to fundraise for things like uniforms for the competitive dance competitions, uniforms, hotel stays, transportation, that sort of thing. And they've taken the approach of, from an equitable perspective to make sure that there's no barriers or to reduce the barriers, that they kind of fundraise a collective pot of money.
With that said, I think the motion needs to be changed so that instead of it talking about the dance studio and their team fundraising, they have lots of teams. They have multiple teams. I think it should be specifically noted that it needs to go to that competitive team, if that's who's asking for it.
It still goes to amp it up, like the check still goes to amp it up. That's the,
We did that with Petty Kodiak, right? We put in a stipulation that it had to be spent on, or our uniforms.
specific uses, yeah, so we could maybe put,
Like, can we do, there was a mom came and presented, she was
Yeah.
asking, it was for a specific team, but it's kind of.
So
I
it
understand.
needs to say they're competitive.
That's right, but
Yeah.
I think it needs to be stipulated that it's specifically for that team.
if, Diane, your thoughts on if we can take a friendly, because we're only approving a 1-year request right now. So can we consider that a friendly amendment for that one
Staying competitive,
competitive, yeah,
I'd add
yeah.
the word, that wouldn't be too bad.
yeah, as a friendly, and then, because the only reason I
There's
wouldn't do it,
multiple Teams, they have multiple
Right.
teams, they just compete, if it's for one, then we should.
I wouldn't do it for a multi-year piece because it would be
Yeah.
it would be a contract. So when the
Yeah.
contract comes, if council approves that, that will be specified in there.
Yeah.
But where it's a one-time, I think we can take a friendly amendment for that, as long as
Caldwell and Bannister.
Caldwell and Bannister are okay
Yeah, I'm
with
okay
that.
with
Yeah, perfect. Okay.
I have a question. Says there's 53 dancers in this group. How does that compare to something like hockey? How many residents from Salisbury are participating in hockey?
To be honest, I probably should know, but I don't. So I think it's,
It's like 258 or.
Yeah, I wanted to
260.
say 220, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's about 50% in Salisbury, from that number, give or take. Dance, I'm not sure the percentage, that they're not all from Salisbury necessarily. I'm not sure if the
No,
number.
because she has kids from Petticoat
Yeah.
that come to her.
We can ask though, they'd be more than happy to share it, so. And that would also be part of our standard process now is with all of our, sport associations, we require postal codes as part of us giving the check. We'll recommend the same thing in the agreement to council.
That's great data.
Yeah, yeah.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So I think the other thing is just noting publicly that, this is open. Anyone that has need for funding should be applying.
Correct.
Right? Because, you don't want people saying, well, why did they get it? I guess, have we made it, have we put the awareness out there that?
Put it on the website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you put it on Facebook?
Yeah.
We've done it part of the budget planning
Yeah.
exercise indicating.
So for the record, it's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on our page.
Yeah. And like we said, we have
Look it up.
three multi-years on top of I think we've approved 5 this
It's
year.
first come, first served.
Yeah.
I think it's getting more broadly known, and again, I think those multi-year agreements are starting to come in. And
It's great. I mean, yeah,
to be honest, I think if we go back historically, the fund is getting used.
that's awesome. Fantastic.
Okay, no additional questions, all in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. Moving on to item number 9, bylaw. First and second reading, bylaw number 50-1, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 50, Village of Salisbury Municipal Plan PID 008-16140.
So there's, before we dive into this, and I'll pass it to Diane from the bylaw reading process itself, we do want to give some context. This is for item or subsection 1 and 2 of this agenda item in light of the public hearing last week. Bear with me, I have a lot of information, but we want to make sure that we give this for matter of public record, given some of the conversations that were addressed. So we had 4 kind of primary follow-up concerns or questions that we committed to following up on. Property assessment values, responsibility for private wells, previous wells or development projects on site, and temporary road construction. So we reached out to Service New Brunswick last week, heard back today. Essentially, anything at this point is speculative in terms of what would happen for property assessments. However, Service New Brunswick does not determine the market. They reflect the market, and assessments are based on said market. So if a property like this were to be constructed, it does not mean that we can guarantee that it would decrease or not increase assessments for nearby properties. It would be dependent on whether or not those properties around it sold, and if they sold for more than their assessed value, under for exactly the same, which is an important element to consider. They did mention that it is of course possible, again, because they reflect the market, that a multi-unit development could negatively affect property value. However, they've stated that in the Southeast in particular, they have not seen this, especially in recent years, as we can imagine. And if that were the case, it would be because, like I said, homes around it would not be selling for their listed price or assessed value. They also stress that this is not what they would consider from an assessment perspective, a large multi-unit project. These are 8 and 6 unit buildings. These are not condos, high rises that can affect traffic significantly or place shadows or those sorts of things on what other projects in larger urban centers may have. They also address the fact that across the province, we've seen blanket increases as the real estate market has boomed, which have, in their words, easily engulfed any negative impact of any multi-unit developments. So again, especially in the Southeast, they're just not seeing any negative impacts. The other piece is that in our perspective from the staff side, although we're not the assessors and we do not determine assessments, is that this is right now a vacant piece of land. We'll have a second access to the street. It will be near a park that's seeing significant investment, near a trail that will see significant investment, near recreation amenities like the field, and the concept of multi-unit development happening on site and decreased assessments does not seem realistic from our best guess. And again, guess.
So was the concern decreased?
Yeah, that was
Or
the
increased?
concern. Yeah, no, it was decreased.
Yeah.
Decrease,
yeah,
yeah,
that's what I
yeah.
said, yeah.
I don't think they were talking about their assessment value. They were talking about their
Selling, that's right, selling, yeah. The other piece that we'll stress from, again, a selling perspective or taxes, property taxes in general, is that many properties in Salisbury, including within that neighborhood, would be under spike protection. So there would be a buffer in a tax bill anyways that would be in place regardless of these buildings. And then the reality is that these things take a number of years to actually take effect. So an assessed value is based on the value of the market as of January 1. We're in August. By the time this is constructed and permits go through, if the rezoning amendments pass, chances are it would not be reflected next year. The year after, it may reflect one building, it may reflect two, again, depending on what passes and how fast it goes. So again, for the sake of stressing it, anything would be speculative at this point, but Service Project did give some helpful information on that. Number 2, responsibility for private wells. So as we stressed or mentioned, I guess, and to stress again tonight, private wells are the responsibility of private homeowners. The town, the municipality has and will continue to take put a very high focus on making sure that we protect private drinking sources where we're reliant on these wells for drinking water. We follow the expertise of licensed hydrologists who have the expertise and the engineering background and follow provincial guidelines to make sure that they quantify water supply and water quality and quantity. And they don't only do that for a development, they also look at neighboring properties, which is very important to consider. So in this instance, for this development, a licensed hydrologist has presented a stamped report based on a comprehensive study. So we discussed that at the public hearing as well, where there were test wells drilled. And I'll quote the summary that says, based on the above information, being the study, relating to water quality or quantity, it is concluded that well PW1, which is the well that was used for the pump test, has 1, sufficient potential groundwater resources for the intended use, and 2, will not aggravate any existing or create new water supply problems. It says the standard disclaimer that it will often need treatment, which is essentially a filtration system. That is standard in any water study that we see. And again, for the sake of stressing it for the record, both for this project and the other, we've had about 5 water studies in the last 2 years, none of which have presented concerns on quality or quantity of water for those particular developments and their intended purpose. So again, I'll stress, we'll continue to do our due diligence, but that is using hydrologists and relying on their expertise to make decisions and recommendations to council. 3, again, bear with me, almost done. The previous developments were also brought up during the public hearing on nearby sites. We do want to stress that we can't present, as you can appreciate, specific details to a great degree in a public session, but we will provide some highlights that give some context. So both the town and Plan 360 reviewed previous development files as far back as 2002, 2003, a lot of movement in 2006 to 2009, that kind of period. And I will stress that these are beyond retention periods for Plan 360, who keeps these files, which is why we can't immediately give answers like that in the public hearing. We did have to do a little bit of digging. So again, we can't divulge too many specifics, but there are essentially three factors to consider. The first being that it's not a comparable development. So the project in question was proposing to create 11 single-family dwelling lots that were undersized or proposed to be undersized. So those would have all required variances. It involved a public street, and then it switched to a private street. And then it went from 11 lots to 9 lots. And then the subdivision process was undertaken without a street, essentially to just combine lots with existing properties as opposed to including dwellings on the newly subdivided lots. And I'll stress again, this is not on the specific parcel. It is very close, but it is not on the land that we are speaking of. So in the end, it did have to deal with the fact there was a requirement for a public road. And as always, land use requirements change regularly. So you can appreciate from 2006-ish, they have changed from a public road perspective, a municipal spec perspective, lot size perspective, what have you. There are a number of changes, regardless of what they are in this case. That is normal. Number two is that a water study was done for one of the proposed uses, which was 11 single-family dwellings. This was not a comprehensive study, so it was an abbreviated study. Nonetheless, the abbreviated study did state that there was sufficient water for the proposed development. So there was no concern at that time with that particular study as it relates to water. And then the third is that, as mentioned, the lots were proposed to be undersized and involved road construction, which was proposed undersized lots to make that feasible. That's not the case in this particular situation. We're proposing reflecting provincial building requirements, which means that this project would meet those. And it's not a case of undersized lots for the proposed development. So again, very similar, very different developments. They're not similar. And we can't really share much more than that. But we do have that assurance based on the conversations last week. Last but not least, again, bear with me, please, almost done, is around temporary road construction for the duration of the development. So it was requested that instead of using McDonald, Braemar, Dundee, that it have a second access immediately, essentially off of McDonald for the time period of construction. These are not rezoning matters to be dealt with. These can be addressed during the subdivision process. Those are contracts that we have with the developer. And what we'll say for now is that we've initiated these conversations with the developer, but they are not dealt with as part of the rezoning. And I'll also mention that this would not be a requirement if they were to put single family dwellings on this lot. And at the same time, it's not a requirement for existing, ongoing or proposed projects in that vicinity. So it's not always a requirement, but based on some concerns raised, we have initiated that conversation with the developer. Again, separate from the rezoning process, it's part of the subdivision process, but those conversations will be ongoing if the rezoning passes. With that, I'll pass it over to council now. We have, again, 3 motions on the floor. And with this, where it's a planning matter, Diane will have to read the amendment in full. So after, if council chooses to pass it.
Motion.
Please.
I'll move that the council of the town of Salisbury get first and second readings of bylaw number 50-1. A bylaw to amend bylaw number 50, the Village of Salisbury Municipal Plan.
So moved by Councilor Venus, seconded by Councilor Thorne. Questions to the motion?
Just a
Councilor-
quick comment. So I know, I just wanted to kind of relate back just for the record. When we did our public consultation, there was a lot of conversation about the prior development, and the reason it didn't move forward was because there wasn't enough water. Seemed to be the general comment from the audience that was here. So based on what you said, we've confirmed there was enough water.
So I
Irrespective of why it didn't move forward, there was enough water.
Right. So at one point, there was an abbreviated water study done, which provided reassurance that there was sufficient water from a licensed engineer. I'm not sure if they were speaking of the same development because there were many phases,
Right, not
many,
like
many,
the-
many, 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 many. And so over time, over phases, things get lost in translation, and that's why we wouldn't be in a position to speak on that. However, we did find a water study, and as you mentioned, that was the concern raised. The water study did not reflect that.
Is
Yeah.
that, it was a valid concern?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
we
Yeah,
found
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
that's what we got. Thank you.
No, I appreciate the diligence by staff. I think it was great input from the public, particularly on the concerns that they had. But water, I think you articulated it very well. Austin, around, when we get these comprehensive water studies, they are experts and they are, we don't take it lightly and we do those for a reason. They're very much needed and, we have to trust in experts, I believe.
Thank you to Diane and Lori. I didn't do any digging. I just had to give the spiel,
Thanks,
so.
But I think, it was great to see the public gallery filled.
Yeah.
Last week, obviously, again, I don't know for percentages, but there was a good chunk of folks in favor of and individuals that did come forward, they were very valid areas that they wanted answers on, which I want to thank Lori Bickford from the Service Commission for me out as well to answer those questions. And it is all part of the process and we'll probably be dealing with these more and more as we go along. And definitely want to encourage public to ask questions as they go along. One of the questions that wasn't brought up there was drainage and that type of a thing from several people afterwards, which again was addressed. And it's going to be taking place.
Subdivision process.
The subdivision process that was there, so some individuals that couldn't make it out to the meeting, so I do want to applaud staff and council as well, and the public for obviously however this vote goes, it's a process, it's democracy, and yeah. So with that, are there any additional questions? No additional questions, all in favor of the motion? Aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. Okay, moving on, then we
No,
have
now
Diane
Diane.
for the good stuff, I guess.
So first and second reads, I'll go the first reading of bylaw number 50-1, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 50, Village of Salisbury Municipal Plan. The council of the town of Salisbury, under the authority vested in it by section 24 and in accordance with section 111 of the Community Planning Act, SNB 2017 C19, amends bylaw number 50, the Village of Salisbury Municipal Plan, and enacts as follows. Number 1, bylaw number 50, the Village of Salisbury Municipal Plan is amended by changing the designation as shown on the future land use map, Schedule A, of the Village of Salisbury Municipal Plan, the property known as PID 00816140, as shown on Schedule A1 attached hereto and forming part thereof from residential, which is R, to Village Center, which is BC. So that is the first reading. Let's see what the second reading entitled, actually in full, I should say. Bylaw number 50-1, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 50, Village of Salisbury Municipal Plan. The council of the town of Salisbury, under the authority vested in it by section 24 and in accordance with section 111 of the Community Planning Act, SNB 2017 C19, amends bylaw number 50, the Village of Salisbury Municipal Plan, and enacts as follows. Number 1, bylaw number 50, the Village of Salisbury Municipal Plan is amended by changing the designation as shown on the future land use map, Schedule A of the Village of Salisbury Municipal Plan, the property known as PID 00816140, as shown on Schedule A1 attached hereto and forming part hereof from residential, which is R, to Village Center, which is BC. This would be second reading on the bylaw amendment 50-1. Third reading and enactment shall take place at the next regular meeting if council so choose. And again, there can be slight amendments until the third. Before the third.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the next motion.
Move the council of the town of Salisbury give first and second readings of bylaw number 51-3. A bylaw to amend bylaw number 51 to Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw.
Second.
So moved by Councilor Bannister, second by Councilor Thorne. No questions to the motion, all in favor? Contrary minded, motion carried.
So first
What?
reading, first reading, bylaw number 51-3, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 51, the Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw. The Council of the Town of Salisbury, under the authority vested in it by Section 53 and in accordance with Section 59 of the Community Planning Act, SNB 2017 C19, amends bylaw number 51, the Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw, and enacts as follows. Number 1. Bylaw number 51 is amended by repealing the minimum lot area for a multi-use unit dwelling in Part 7, Residential Neighborhood Services, or RNS zone, Section 7.2A of the zoning requirements, and replacing the minimum lot area with 1,545 square meters, which is 16,630.4 square feet, plus 102 square meters, which is 1,097.9 square feet per dwelling unit over 4. Number 2, furthermore, by law number 51 is further amended by repealing the minimum lot area for a multiple unit dwelling in Part 8, the Village Center, which is VC zone, Section 8.1A of the zoning requirements, and replacing the minimum lot area with 1,545 square meters, which is 16,630.4 square feet, plus 102 square meters, which is 1,097.9 square feet per dwelling unit over 4. The first reading, so second reading of bylaw number 51-3, a bylaw to amend the bylaw number 51, Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw. The Council of the Town of Salisbury, under the authority vested in it by Section 53 and in accordance with Section 59 of the Community Planning Act, SNB 2017 C19, amends bylaw number 51, the Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw, and enacts as follows. Number 1, bylaw number 51 is amended by repealing the minimum lot area for a multi-unit dwelling in Part 7, Residential Neighborhood Service, or RNS zone, Section 7.2A of the zoning requirements, and replacing the minimum lot area with 1,545 square meters, which is 16,630.4 square feet, plus 102 square meters is 1,097.9 square feet per dwelling unit over 4. Number 2. Furthermore, bylaw number 51 is further amended by repealing the minimum lot area for a multiple unit dwelling in Part 8 of the Village Center, which is VC zone, Section 8.1A of the zoning requirements, and replacing the minimum lot area with 1,545 square meters, which is 16,630.4 square feet, plus 102 square meters, which is 1,097.9 square feet per dwelling unit over 4. Again, this is the second reading. Third reading can take place at the next council meeting of council so wish, and amendments can be made anytime before that.
Bravo.
Bravo.
Missed one.
Let's move on to the third motion.
Why can't we do them by title only?
Can't when they're planning matters.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll move that council of the town of Salisbury give first and second readings of bylaw number 51-4, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 51, the Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw.
Seconded by Councilor Colwell, seconded by Councilor Dykstra, or who's first? So, Councilor Deputy Mayor. Thorne?
Yeah, I think.
What?
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 I don't know.
Who was it?
Really?
Jason.
Go ahead.
Okay. While Diane gets a breath, I think for third reading, we don't need to read by, we just need to read it for one session.
Yeah.
That's right.
I should specify that every time.
Okay, we have the motion on the floor. Do we have questions to the motion? No questions to the motion, all in favor? Aye. Reminded, motion carried. Diane, I'll give you a little bit of time.
Reading, yeah. First reading of bylaw number 51-4, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 51, Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw. The council of the town of Salisbury, under the authority vested in it by section 53 and in accordance with section 59 of the Community Planning Act, SNB 2017 C19, amends bylaw number 51, the Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw, and enacts as follows. Number 1, bylaw number 51, the Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw is amended by changing the zoning as shown on the zoning map Schedule A of the Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw, the property known as PID 00816-140 as shown on Schedule A4, attached here to and forming part hereof, from residential use or RU to Village Center VC for residential purposes, subject to the following conditions. The plan that the permitted main use are limited to single unit dwelling, 2-unit dwelling, semi-detached dwelling, or multiple unit dwellings, subject to terms and conditions imposed by the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee. Number 2, bylaw number 51-4, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 51, Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw. The council of the town of Salisbury, under the authority vested in it by section 53 and in accordance with section 59 of the Community Planning Act, SNB 2017 C19, amends the bylaw number 51, the Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw, and enacts as follows. Bylaw number 51, I should say, number 1, bylaw number 51, the Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw is amended by changing the zoning as shown on the zoning map Schedule A of the Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw for property known as PID 00816-140 as shown on Schedule A for attached hereto and forming part hereof, the residential use or RU to Village Center VC for residential purposes, subject to the following terms and conditions. That the permitted main uses are limited to single unit dwelling, 2-unit dwelling, semi-detached dwelling, or multiple unit dwelling, subject to terms and conditions imposed by the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee. Second reading in full, third reading can be made at the next council meeting if council so wishes. And again, this can be amended before the third reading.
Yeah.
I know that your lungs are in good shape.
I'll move that we go to close.
So with that, closed session, Land 68-1D, Local Governance Act, Land 68-1D, Local Governance Act, Personnel 68-1J, Local Governance Act, Financial 68-1C, Local Governance Act, Contractual 68-1C, Local Governance Act. Do I have a motion to enter into close? Moved by Councillor Rowena, seconded by Councillor Bannister. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. Let's move into close, please.
Okay, just one
Go back into regular council.
Second it.
Okay, so we had Councillor Colwell move back in regular session. Councillor Bannister seconded the motion. We are now back into open session. With that, we will move on to mayor and councillor statements and inquiries. The only thing that I have would be just that we have community days coming up later this week, and looking forward to seeing community out celebrating our great community. Does anybody else have any comments?
Congratulations to the community on being the #1 Brunswick.
Yeah, it's really repeat. Like a dynasty. All right.
Thank you, everybody, for coming to all the work parties.
Oh, yeah, the work party that
They were great to see everybody.
All right, if there's nothing additional, moving on to item number 12, notices of motions and resolutions. Item number 1, cultural policy pilot committee terms of reference.
This is just a formality to adopt terms of reference again for a committee that's started, but based on alignment of other committee terms of references that we have for all of our other committees of council. For the UMB cultural policy pilot, which is ongoing.
I move the council approves the terms of reference for the Cultural Policy Development Committee.
Councillor Tory, seconded by Councillor Thorne. Questions to the motion?
Who's all on the count? Is it already created?
Yeah, it's there. Council appointed the people, but we didn't have terms of reference. sorry.
Great.
And then there's members of the public. They elect their chair coming up here soon. They needed this first, so there's a teacher.
The 20th, there's teachers,
Yeah.
people, parts of the members of the arts community.
Yeah. I'll send the list in the WAG though, actually.
Okay, no additional questions? No additional questions, all in favor of the motion? Contrary minded, motion carried. Moving on to item number 2, authorization to increase adjustment to town of Salisbury line of credit.
So this is, again, another formality. The town has a line of credit based on a percentage of our operating budget, which is much different than our existing line of credit percentage of the operating budget when the line of credit was established. We do not use the line of credit unless needed to float from one project to another. So we will generally do basically interfund transfers for the utility to borrow from general until grant money comes in, what have you. This is always a backup to make sure, I always use the example that the lights stay on. So as part of our work, we mentioned the CRF. The next thing is looking at credit cards. This is a recommended adjustment to reflect the town's operating budget from 2.5 million to 6.9, I think is the number, which just gives Diane the authorization to formalize those conversations with our everyday banking
So
provider.
this is going from 50,000 to 200, right?
Correct.
Can we change this?
Yep.
Because it gives you
Yeah,
it gives you the impression that we're increasing it by 200,000, not increasing it to 200,000.
So why don't you make?
Who has made the motion?
yeah, because we haven't read the motion yet. So yeah, we can do it.
That's
Yeah.
I move the council authorize clerk treasurer to request an increase to the current CIBC line of credit to a maximum of $200,000.
Seconded moved by Councillor Tory, seconded by Councillor Colwell, I think it was. The gate. Questions to the motion?
Go for it.
Questions to the motion, all in favor? Minded, motion carried. Moving on to item number 3, a COA agreement for Emar arbitration.
Finally, this agreement that we were waiting for that I think I was gonna lose sleep over, just a formality to sign it.
I move that council authorize the clerk and mayor to sign and fix the corporate seal on the funding agreement between the town of Salisbury and the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, ACOA, for the purposes of constructing the Braemar to Parkin Trail.
Moved by Councillor Dexter, seconded by Deputy Mayor Bland. Questions to the motion?
Get it done.
Questions to the motion, all in favor? Reminded, motion carried. Moving on to item number 4, amendment to residential subdivision agreement number 1, Eagle.
So this was a formality. We've adopted it in principle over email based on timing. But I had accidentally left in an old warranty period that doesn't reflect the arrangement that was approved. So requires, again, where it changes text, we wanted a formality to approve just to be safe. So this is the decision that council already made, but to ratify it.
I'll move that council authorize the amendment to the warranty period of the previously ratified developer agreement. Given the town will be undertaking the work as part of its capital plan with additional warranty on the asphalt work surface. And affix the resolution as a schedule to the executed agreement to confirm the amendment as approved.
Moved by Councillor Blinis, seconded by Councillor Thorne. Questions to the motion? Questions to the motion, all in favor? Reminded, motion carried. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Seconded by Councillor Spencer. Motion, none being heard. All in favor?
Aye.
Reminded,